Becoming Storm. The holographic display flickered in the dimly lit command center as Captain Anthony Cooper studied the latest intelligence reports. 7 years of military service hadn't prepared him for what was unfolding before his eyes. The Hadai invasion wasn't just another border skirmish or pirate incursion, it was an existential threat to humanity itself. "Sir, we've got movement in Sector 7, Lieutenant Sarah Chen called out from her station, her fingers dancing across the tactical interface. 3 more Hadai cruisers just dropped out of Quantum. Cooper straightened his back, feeling the weight of command pressing down on his shoulders. As the leader of Bravo Troop, 5th Squadron, 10th Regiment, 2nd Armored Division, he was responsible for 36 lives and 12 state-of-the-art armored vehicles. But today, those numbers felt impossibly small against the scale of what they were facing. "Put it on the main display, Chen," he ordered, walking closer to the holographic projection that dominated the center of the room. The image shifted, revealing the cold vastness of space punctuated by the menacing silhouettes of Hadai warships. Their biomechanical designs were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered, organic curves melded with crystalline structures, creating vessels that looked more like deep space predators than conventional spacecraft. "They're maintaining their current vector," Chen reported, her voice steady despite the tension. "Heading straight for Outpost 2222. Cooper's jaw tightened. Outpost 2222 was one of their forwardmost positions, commanded by Colonel Hardgrove MacDonald, a veteran officer Cooper had served under during his early days in the service. The outpost was primarily designed for anti-piracy operations, with only a handful of patrol boats at its disposal. Against a Hadai cruiser, they wouldn't stand a chance. "Get me a secure channel to Colonel MacDonald," Cooper ordered, but before Chen could comply, the command center's doors slid open with a hydraulic hiss. Command Sergeant Major Marcus Rhodes, a battle-hardened veteran with more combat drops than most officers had simulations, strode into the room. His expression was grim, the kind of look that veterans wore when they knew something the rest of the world hadn't figured out yet. "Captain Cooper," Rhodes said, his voice carrying the weight of decades of service, "we've just received word from High Command. The entire UEE military has been placed under Threat Condition 1. The room fell silent. In 7 years of service, Cooper had never seen anything higher than Threat Con 2, and that was during the Vanduul incursion 3 years prior. Threat Con 1 meant war was imminent. "All bases are now restricted to military personnel only," Rhodes continued. "MPs are operating under maximum security protocols. And sir." He paused, meeting Cooper's gaze. 9th Army has been placed under Combat Condition 3. Cooper felt his blood run cold. Combat Con 3 meant half their unit would be preparing equipment while the other half rested, rotating shifts to maintain constant readiness. The entire unit had to be prepared to move within 24 hours. "What about diplomatic channels?" Cooper asked, though he already suspected the answer. The first strike. The massive transport ship shuddered as it dropped out of quantum travel. Captain Anthony Cooper stood at the viewport, watching as the swirling quantum wake dissipated to reveal the staging area in the Helio system. What he saw took his breath away. Thousands of UEE warships filled the space before him, their hulls gleaming in the light of the system's twin suns. From nimble corvettes to massive dreadnoughts, it was the largest assembly of military might humanity had ever gathered in one place. Cooper had known the numbers intellectually, the combined strength of 3 full army groups, but seeing it in person was something else entirely. "Quite a sight, isn't it?" Cooper turned to find Colonel Sarah Matthews, the 5th Squadron's commanding officer, standing beside him. Her weathered face bore the same expression of awe he imagined was on his own. "Yes, ma'am," he replied. "Though I can't help but wonder if it's enough." Matthews's expression hardened slightly. "It has to be, Captain. The Hadai have pushed too far, too fast. Intelligence suggests they're overstretched. This is our chance to bloody their nose and show them humanity isn't as soft as they think." Before Cooper could respond, the ship's intercom crackled to life. All squadron commanders and troop leaders to the tactical briefing room. Repeat, all squadron commanders and troop leaders to the tactical briefing room. The briefing room was packed when Cooper arrived, filled with officers from across the 2nd Armored Division. The air was thick with tension and the smell of recycled ship air. At the front of the room stood Major General Elena Santos, the division commander, her uniform pristine despite the weeks of preparation in transit. Ladies and gentlemen, Santos began without preamble, Operation Thunderbolt begins in 6 hours. Our objective is the Arcturus system, specifically the colony world of New Alexandria. The holographic display behind her came to life, showing a detailed map of the Arcturus system. New Alexandria hung like a blue-green jewel in the void, but now surrounded by the ominous red markers indicating Hadai presence. New Alexandria was one of the first major colonies to fall, Santos continued. Population of 12 million, significant industrial capacity, and most importantly, a strategic position that the Hadai have been using to support their continued advance. We're going to take it back. The general's fingers danced across the tactical interface, and the display zoomed in on the planet's surface. The Hadai have established 3 major ground bases, here, and here. They're using modified human infrastructure, which gives us an advantage. We know the terrain better than they do. Cooper studied the tactical overlay, noting the placement of enemy positions and the surrounding terrain. New Alexandria had been primarily an agricultural world, with vast plains broken by occasional mountain ranges and forests. Good tank country, as the old saying went. 2nd Armored will be the tip of the spear, Santos announced. 5th Squadron, you'll be leading the charge against the northern base. Intelligence suggests it's their primary ground force staging area. Take it out, and we cut off their ability to reinforce the other positions. The briefing continued for another hour, covering everything from orbital insertion protocols to contingency plans. Cooper took detailed notes, already thinking about how to position his troops for maximum effect. The Hadai had proven formidable in space combat, but this would be humanity's first major ground engagement with them. No one quite knew what to expect. As the briefing concluded, Cooper felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Command Sergeant Major Rhodes. "Got a minute, sir?" Rhodes asked, gesturing toward a quiet corner of the room. Once they were alone, Rhodes pulled out a data pad. "Just got this from intelligence. Thought you should see it." He handed the pad to Cooper. The screen showed detailed scans of Hadai ground forces, taken by stealth reconnaissance drones. Their vehicles were like nothing Cooper had ever seen, part machine, part biological construct. They moved with an unsettling organic fluidity despite their massive size. "They're calling them behemoths," Rhodes explained. "Some kind of biomechanical tank analog. Conventional kinetic weapons seem to just bounce off unless you hit them in very specific spots." Cooper studied the images carefully. "What about their weak points?" "That's the interesting part," Rhodes said, swiping to a new image. "See these structures here? They look like sensory organs. Hit them right, and the whole thing goes into some kind of seizure. The problem is getting close enough to make the shot." Cooper nodded slowly, an idea forming in his mind. "Get me everything we have on their sensor capabilities. And I want to talk to our tech specialists about modifying our ECM systems." The next 6 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Cooper's troops checked and rechecked their equipment, while he worked with the squadron's technical team to implement his plan. It was risky, but if it worked. The call to battle stations came exactly on schedule. Cooper stood in the command compartment of his Anvil Tonk heavy tank, watching through the optical sensors as their transport descended toward New Alexandria's surface. The planet's twin moons hung in the pre-dawn sky, casting an ethereal light over the landscape below. "All units, this is Bravo 6, Cooper broadcast to his troop. Remember your training. Remember Colonel MacDonald. But most importantly, remember what we're fighting for. Those are our people down there, waiting for liberation. Let's not keep them waiting." The transport's bay doors opened with a hydraulic whine, revealing the landscape below. Cooper's tank was first in line, its massive tracks gripping the loading ramp. "Bravo troop, deploy." The tank rolled forward and dropped onto New Alexandria's soil with a ground-shaking impact. The rest of his vehicles followed in perfect formation, spreading out across the terrain as they'd practiced countless times. In the distance, Cooper could see the silhouettes of other units deploying, hundreds of vehicles moving into position under the cover of darkness. The first indication that the Hadai had detected them came in the form of strange, undulating energy signatures on their sensors. The alien vessels in orbit were beginning to move, responding to the human fleet's arrival. But Cooper's attention was focused on the ground, where massive shapes were emerging from the Hadai base. "Behemoths, dead ahead," his gunner reported. "Counting 6, no, 8 of them. Range 12 kilometers and closing." Cooper keyed his comm, "All units, implement ECM pattern Delta. Remember, we need to get them to commit fully before we spring the trap." The modified electronic countermeasure systems on their tanks began broadcasting carefully calibrated frequencies that, according to their analysis, would appear as background noise to Hadai sensors. The human forces appeared to fall back in disarray, presenting what seemed to be an easy target. The behemoths took the bait, accelerating forward with that uncanny organic movement. They were impressive and terrifying in equal measure, their biomechanical forms moving with a grace that should have been impossible for something so large. "Hold!" Cooper ordered as the distance closed. "Hold!" At 5 kilometers, the behemoths suddenly slowed, their sensory organs pulsing with increased activity. They'd noticed something was wrong, but it was too late. "Now! All units, execute!" Every tank in Bravo troop fired simultaneously, their main guns targeting the precisely calculated weak points on the Hadai vehicles. The ECM systems switched to full power, broadcasting directly into the alien sensory organs at frequencies designed to cause maximum disruption. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The behemoths writhed in what appeared to be agony, their coordinated advance dissolving into chaos. Some began firing wildly, their weapons discharging in random directions. Others simply froze in place, their systems overwhelmed by the electronic assault. "All units, advance. Take them while they're confused." Cooper's tanks surged forward, pouring fire into the disoriented Hadai forces. The aliens tried to respond, but their usual coordination was shattered by the continuing electronic attack. One by one, the mighty behemoths fell, their biomechanical forms collapsing into smoking ruins. But the victory came with a cost. 2 of Cooper's tanks were hit by the behemoths' random fire, their crews forced to bail out as their vehicles burned. The aliens, even in their death throes, were incredibly dangerous. As the last behemoth fell, Cooper received a transmission from Colonel Matthews. "Outstanding work, Bravo 6. The other formations are reporting similar success with your ECM tactics. The northern base is wide open, push forward and take it." The next few hours were a blur of combat as human forces pressed their advantage. The Hadai, their ground forces thrown into disarray, struggled to mount an effective defense. By mid-morning, the northern base was secure, and with it, a wealth of intelligence about their alien enemies. Standing in the captured base, surrounded by the strange biomechanical architecture of the Hadai, Cooper felt a complex mix of emotions. They'd won their first major ground engagement, proved that humanity could fight back effectively. But the cost in lives and equipment had been significant, and this was just one base on one planet. "Sir," Rhodes approached, holding another data pad. "You're going to want to see this. We found it in their command center." The pad displayed what appeared to be Hadai tactical documents, partially translated by their AI systems. Cooper's blood ran cold as he read them. The aliens hadn't just invaded human space for territory or resources, they were conducting experiments on human populations, trying to understand what made humanity so adaptable, so resilient. "Get this to intelligence immediately," Cooper ordered. And Rhodes, let's keep this quiet for now. The troops have enough to worry about. As the sun set over New Alexandria, Cooper looked out over the battlefield from the base's observation post. Human engineering teams were already at work, converting the facility back to their use. In orbit, the space battle continued, but the ground war, at least in this sector, had been won. It was a significant victory, but Cooper couldn't shake the feeling that it was just the beginning. The Hadai would learn from this defeat, adapt their tactics. The next battle would be harder. But humanity would adapt too. They had to. The alternative was extinction. The turning point. 3 months after the Battle of New Alexandria, Captain Anthony Cooper stood in a heavily fortified underground facility on Europa, Jupiter's ice-covered moon. The room was filled with military and scientific personnel, all gathered around a massive holographic display showing the dissected remains of a Hadai behemoth. The biomechanical integration is far more extensive than we initially believed, Dr. Elena Volkov, the lead xenobiologist, explained. Her hands moved through the hologram, highlighting different sections of the alien war machine. It's not just a mechanical construct with biological components, the entire system is a singular organism, grown rather than built. Cooper studied the display intently. After his successful tactics at New Alexandria, he'd been temporarily reassigned to a special research task force. His practical combat experience with the Hadai made him valuable to the scientists trying to understand their technology. That explains their repair capabilities, he noted, pointing to a particular section. We've seen them regenerate damage in the field, but it's not traditional repair work. They're healing. Precisely, Volkov agreed. But here's where it gets interesting. She zoomed in on what appeared to be the creature's neural cluster. The behemoths aren't just biological tanks, they're engineered life forms with their own form of intelligence. And more importantly, they share a unified consciousness with their Hadai masters. The revelation sent murmurs through the assembled group. Colonel Matthews, who had also been assigned to the task force, stepped forward. Are you saying they're all connected? Like some kind of hive mind? Not exactly, Volkov corrected. It's more like a quantum entanglement of consciousness. Each unit maintains individual autonomy, but they share experiences and learning instantly across vast distances. It's how they adapt so quickly to new tactics. Cooper's mind raced with the tactical implications. That's why our ECM attack at New Alexandria was so effective. We weren't just disrupting their sensors, we were disrupting their entire neural network. But they've already adapted to those frequencies, Rhodes added from his position near the door. We've tried the same tactics twice more, with diminishing returns each time. Then we need to find new frequencies, new methods of disruption, Cooper said, but Volkov was already shaking her head. They'll just adapt again. But she manipulated the hologram again, revealing a complex pattern of energy signatures. What if we could use their own network against them? Before she could elaborate, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Red emergency lights flashed as a voice came over the intercom, alert. Multiple Hadai signatures detected entering the Sol system. This is not a drill. All personnel to battle stations. The room erupted into controlled chaos as military personnel rushed to their posts. Cooper was halfway to the door when Colonel Matthews caught his arm. Cooper, you need to see this first, she said, pulling him toward a secondary display. It showed a tactical map of the Sol system, with dozens of Hadai vessels appearing at various points. But something was different about their movement pattern. They're not pushing straight for Earth, Cooper observed. They're spreading out, targeting multiple outer system colonies simultaneously. And most of our fleet is still tied up in Arcturus and Helios, Matthews added grimly. We don't have enough ships to defend everything at once. Then we choose our battles, Cooper said firmly. And we make them count. The next 48 hours were a blur of activity as humanity's military scrambled to respond to the multi-pronged Hadai assault. Cooper found himself back in command of Bravo Troop, now reinforced with additional vehicles and personnel, preparing to defend the Europa research facility. The Hadai had clearly learned from their defeat at New Alexandria. Their forces approached in smaller, more mobile groups, using complex maneuvers that made their old tactics of mass assault seem primitive by comparison. They were evolving, adapting, learning. But so was humanity. In the command center beneath Europa's icy surface, Cooper watched as Dr. Volkov and her team worked frantically to implement their new strategy. They had rigged a captured behemoth's neural cluster to broadcast into the Hadai network, not to disrupt it, but to feed it carefully crafted false information. If we can't break their network, Volkov explained as she made final adjustments, we can poison it. Feed them data that seems real but leads them to make critical mistakes. The first test of their new strategy came sooner than expected. A Hadai assault force, consisting of both ships and ground units, appeared in Europa orbit. Their formation was perfect, their approach calculated to minimize exposure to defensive fire. But they were fighting a battle based on false intelligence. Cooper's forces were not where the Hadai expected them to be. The defensive positions they targeted were empty, the weapon emplacements they tried to avoid were actually their most vulnerable approach vectors. It was like watching a perfectly choreographed dance where one partner was following the wrong steps. All units, execute Operation Phantom, Cooper ordered as the Hadai committed to their fatal mistake. Show them what real chaos looks like. Human forces emerged from hidden positions, catching the Hadai in a devastating crossfire. Their normally precise movements became erratic as conflicting data flooded their neural network. Some units froze completely, caught between the false intelligence they were receiving and the reality of their situation. But the true turning point came when a Hadai commander, apparently realizing something was wrong, attempted to sever their forces from the network. The sudden disconnection created a cascade effect, causing several behemoths to go completely berserk, turning on their own forces in their confusion. It's working better than we hoped, Volkov observed from her station. The separation from the network is causing a form of psychotic break in their biomechanical units. They've become so dependent on the shared consciousness that they can't function properly without it. The battle for Europa was over in less than 6 hours, the fastest victory humanity had achieved against the Hadai to date. But Cooper knew better than to celebrate too early. The aliens would adapt to this tactic too, probably faster than they had to previous strategies. The real victory wasn't in the battle itself, but in what they had learned. The Hadai weren't invincible. Their greatest strength, their unified consciousness and ability to share experiences, could be turned into a weakness. And most importantly, humanity had proven once again that it could adapt and overcome. In the aftermath of the battle, Cooper found himself in a secure briefing room with high-ranking officers from across the Sol system. The tactical display showed multiple engagements playing out across human space, some going better than others. The Europa strategy is being implemented across all theaters, General Santos announced. Early results are promising, but the Hadai are already showing signs of developing countermeasures. We need to push our advantage while we have it. Cooper studied the strategic display, noting how the Hadai forces were beginning to adjust their formations, creating smaller, more independent battle groups that were less reliant on the neural network. They were learning, evolving their tactics just as humanity was. We can't rely on the same trick twice, he said, more to himself than the room. We need to stay ahead of them, keep them reacting to us instead of the other way around. Agreed, Santos replied. Which is why you're being promoted, Cooper. Effective immediately, you're being given command of the entire 5th Squadron. Colonel Matthews has been reassigned to head up our new Tactical Innovation Division. Cooper blinked in surprise. Ma'am, I'm not sure I'm. You've shown a unique ability to understand and counter Hadai tactics, Santos cut him off. More importantly, you understand that this war isn't just about who has the biggest guns or the most ships. It's about adaptation, innovation, and the willingness to try new approaches. As the briefing continued, Cooper's mind was already racing with new ideas. The Hadai's biomechanical nature, their dependence on their neural network, their ability to learn and adapt, these weren't just tactical considerations. They were keys to understanding their entire civilization. Later that night, unable to sleep, Cooper found himself back in the research facility, studying the captured Hadai technology. Dr. Volkov was still there, running new analyses on the neural cluster data. "Something's been bothering me," Cooper said, watching the streams of alien data flow across her screens. "Why are they so interested in humans specifically? Their experimental data, their attack patterns, everything suggests they're studying us as much as they're fighting us." Volkov nodded, not looking up from her work. "I have a theory about that. Look at this." She pulled up a comparison between human neural patterns and the Hadai network architecture. "The similarities are striking. I think they recognize something of themselves in us, our adaptability, our potential for both individual and collective action. They're not just trying to conquer us," Cooper realized. "They're trying to understand us. Maybe even, improve themselves using what they learn from us." "Exactly," Volkov agreed. "Which means this war isn't just about territory or resources. It's about the future evolution of both our species." The implications were staggering. If Volkov was right, then every battle, every engagement, was teaching the Hadai something new about humanity. But it was also teaching humanity something about itself, about its capacity for innovation, adaptation, and survival. As Cooper left the research facility, he looked up through Europa's ice crust at the gas giant Jupiter looming above. The war was far from over, but for the first time since it began, he felt like they truly understood what they were fighting for, and more importantly, what they were fighting against. The Hadai thought they could study humanity, learn from it, maybe even subsume it. But they had overlooked one crucial factor: humans were not just test subjects or potential resources. They were becoming something the galaxy had never seen before, reluctant but increasingly effective masters of warfare, forced to evolve and adapt by an enemy that had underestimated them. The next phase of the war would test this evolution to its limits. The counteroffensive. Major Anthony Cooper stood on the bridge of the UEE flagship terminus, watching as the combined fleet prepared for the largest military operation in human history. Operation Stormbreaker, the counteroffensive that would either turn the tide of the war or spell humanity's doom. 6 months had passed since the breakthrough on Europa. In that time, humanity had transformed its military doctrine, adapting and evolving faster than even the Hadai could match. The promotion to major had come with command of not just the 5th Squadron, but responsibility for developing new combat strategies for the entire 2nd Armored Division. "Fleet is in position, sir," reported Commander Chen, the same Sarah Chen who had served under Cooper when he was just a captain. She'd followed him up through the ranks, proving herself invaluable in implementing his increasingly innovative tactics. "Status of the Phantom Network?" Cooper asked, referring to the sophisticated electronic warfare system they developed based on Dr. Volkov's research. "All nodes are green," Chen confirmed. "The Hadai won't know what hit them." The target was the Proxima system, a vital Hadai logistics hub that supported their operations across 3 sectors. Taking it would not only disrupt their supply lines but provide humanity with a forward base for further operations. General Santos's voice came over the command channel. "All units, commence Operation Stormbreaker. Good hunting." The human fleet jumped into quantum travel with perfect synchronization, a maneuver they practiced countless times. Cooper felt the familiar disorientation as space twisted around them, followed by the sudden clarity as they emerged in the Proxima system. The Hadai were waiting for them. "Multiple enemy contacts," Chen called out. "They knew we were coming." Cooper allowed himself a small smile. "Of course they did. Execute Phase 2. The human fleet scattered in what appeared to be panic, breaking formation and retreating in disarray. The Hadai ships, their biomechanical forms gleaming in Proxima's red sunlight, moved to pursue, exactly as planned. "They're taking the bait," Cooper observed. "All units, prepare for maneuver thunderclap." The Hadai had learned to be wary of human electronic warfare, had developed countermeasures against the tactics used at Europa. But they hadn't realized that humanity had moved beyond simple disruption. The Phantom Network wasn't just about jamming their neural network, it was about understanding it, predicting it, and using it against them. "Phantom Network is recording their response patterns," Dr. Volkov reported from her station. The xenobiologist had insisted on being present for this operation, and her expertise had proven invaluable. "Their adaptations are exactly as we predicted." Cooper nodded. "Execute Phase 3. The retreating human ships suddenly reversed course, but not in the chaotic way that panic would cause. Their movements were precise, calculated, forming new formations that exploited gaps in Hadai defensive patterns, gaps that existed because of how their neural network processed tactical information. Multiple direct hits on Hadai capital ships, Chen reported as the first salvos struck home. "Their formation is breaking up." But Cooper's attention was already on the next phase. "Launch ground forces. All armored units, prepare for orbital insertion." The 2nd Armored Division, along with elements of 3 other divisions, began their descent toward Proxima II. The planet had been a human colony before the Hadai took it, and its surface was now covered with their biomechanical structures. Taking it back wouldn't be easy, but Cooper had planned for that too. "All units, implement Phantom Protocol Sierra," he ordered as the drop ships entered the atmosphere. "Let's show them what we've learned about their architecture." The Hadai ground defenses were formidable, massive biomechanical constructs that merged seamlessly with the landscape. But humanity had spent months studying similar structures, learning their weaknesses, understanding how they thought and reacted. Cooper's command vehicle touched down in the midst of chaos, but it was a controlled chaos, one that human forces were using to their advantage. The Hadai defenders were reacting exactly as their simulations had predicted, moving to counter threats that weren't there while leaving themselves vulnerable to the real attacks. "Major," Chen's voice came over the comm, "we're detecting unusual activity in their neural network. The pattern doesn't match anything we've seen before." Cooper frowned. "Put it on my display." The data stream showed something unprecedented. The Hadai were attempting to completely reconfigure their network architecture in real time, trying to break free of the predictable patterns that humans had learned to exploit. "They're evolving faster than we expected," Volkov observed, her voice tense. "If they succeed." "They won't," Cooper interrupted. "Because we're not just fighting their current form, we're fighting what they're trying to become." Execute Protocol Omega. The Phantom Network shifted into its final configuration, one they'd held in reserve for exactly this situation. It didn't try to predict or disrupt the Hadai network, instead, it began feeding it the sum total of human military history, thousands of years of warfare, victory, and defeat. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The Hadai network, trying to process and adapt to millennia of human combat evolution all at once, began to overload. Their carefully coordinated defenses fell into disarray as their unified consciousness tried to simultaneously implement countless different strategies. "Ground forces reporting multiple breakthroughs," Chen announced. "The Hadai are falling back across all sectors." But Cooper noticed something else in the data, something that made his blood run cold. "Dr. Volkov, look at these patterns. Are you seeing what I'm seeing?" The xenobiologist studied the display, her eyes widening. "They're not just processing the data, they're learning from it. All of it. At an incredible rate. How long before they adapt?" "Hours, maybe less. But..." She paused, analyzing a new data stream. "Major, I don't think adaptation is their goal anymore. Look at these neural patterns, they're fundamentally changing their entire approach to warfare." Cooper watched as the Hadai forces began to move in new ways, implementing strategies that seemed to combine their biomechanical precision with distinctly human unpredictability. They were becoming something new, something that neither humanity nor the Hadai had been before. All units, Cooper broadcast, press the advantage while we have it. But be prepared for anything. The enemy you face in the next hour may not be the same one you're fighting now. The battle for Proxima 2 raged for 3 more days. The Hadai continued to evolve, each engagement teaching them more about human warfare while forcing humanity to adapt in turn. But the initial advantage proved decisive. By the time the aliens had fully processed and adapted to humanity's tactics, their forces in the system had been too badly damaged to mount an effective defense. Standing in the captured Hadai command center, Cooper surveyed the aftermath of the battle. The biomechanical structures were already beginning to decay without their controllers, but the data they contained was intact. "Sir," Chen approached, holding a data pad. "Final casualty reports. We lost 30% of our ground forces and 25% of the fleet, but we took the system. The Hadai are in full retreat across 2 sectors." Cooper nodded grimly. The losses were heavy, but they'd achieved something unprecedented, the first major strategic victory against the Hadai since the war began. "Major," Dr. Volkov called from her station, "I think you need to see this. We've managed to decrypt some of their strategic planning data." The information displayed on her screen confirmed Cooper's worst fears. The Hadai weren't just fighting a war of conquest, they were conducting a vast evolutionary experiment. Each battle, each engagement, was teaching them more about human adaptability, creativity, and warfare. "They're using us," he realized. "This whole war, they're using it to force themselves to evolve." "Not just themselves," Volkov corrected. "Look at how our own tactics have evolved, how quickly we've adapted to fighting them. They're forcing us to evolve too. The question is, into what?" Before Cooper could respond, General Santos's voice came over the command channel. "Major Cooper, report to the terminus immediately. High Command has reviewed the operation data. We're promoting you to Colonel and giving you command of the entire counteroffensive in this sector." As Cooper prepared to leave the command center, he took one last look at the alien architecture around him. The Hadai had thought they could control humanity's evolution, guide it in the direction they wanted. Instead, they'd created something they couldn't control, a species that was learning to master warfare not through conquest or dominance, but through necessity and innovation. The war was far from over, but its nature had fundamentally changed. It was no longer just about territory or survival, it was about the future evolution of both species, about what they would become in their desperate struggle to overcome each other. As his shuttle lifted off from Proxima 2's surface, Cooper wondered what that future would look like. The Hadai had wanted to study human adaptability, now they were experiencing it firsthand, in ways they had never anticipated. The next phase of the war would determine not just who won, but what the winners would become. The price of victory. Major General Anthony Cooper stood at the viewport of the UEE command carrier Invictus, watching as the combined human-Hadai fleet maneuvered through the debris field that had once been the Nexus, the central hub of the Hadai's neural network. 2 years had passed since the Battle of Proxima, and everything had changed. "The integration is holding steady," reported Admiral Sarah Chen, his former lieutenant now commanding her own battle group. "Hadai bioships are responding perfectly to human command protocols." Cooper nodded, his expression thoughtful. The sight before him would have been unimaginable just months ago, human and Hadai vessels operating in perfect synchronization, their strengths complementing each other in ways that made both more effective than they had been alone. "Status of the resistance forces," he asked, referring to the hardline faction of Hadai who refused to accept the new reality. "Still holding in the Antares cluster," Chen replied. "But without access to the central network, their ability to coordinate is severely limited. The combined fleet should be able to contain them." The combined fleet. Cooper still found the term strange, but it reflected the new reality they lived in. The war had changed both species in ways no one could have predicted. What had started as a conflict for survival had evolved into something far more complex, a crucible that had forged both humanity and the Hadai into something new. Dr. Elena Volkov entered the bridge, her presence a reminder of how far they'd come. The xenobiologist who had first helped them understand the Hadai neural network was now the lead scientist of the integration project. The latest neural scans are complete, she announced, bringing up a holographic display. The synthesis between human creativity and Hadai collective consciousness is proceeding faster than we anticipated. The display showed the intricate patterns of the new hybrid network they'd created, not a hive mind like the original Hadai system, but something that preserved individual autonomy while allowing for unprecedented levels of coordination and shared experience. Cooper remembered the moment everything had changed, 18 months ago during the Battle of Antares Prime. The Hadai, pushed to the brink by humanity's increasingly effective counteroffensive, had attempted something unprecedented, a direct neural interface with captured human soldiers. But instead of subsuming the human consciousness as they'd intended, something unexpected had happened. The interface had worked both ways, giving the Hadai their first true understanding of human individuality and creativity. The experience had fractured their species, with many realizing that their attempt to forcibly evolve through conflict had been misguided. General, Chen interrupted his thoughts, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Hadai Synthetic Council. The holographic display shifted, showing the distinctive biomechanical form of Nexus, Protocol 7, one of the moderate Hadai leaders who had helped broker the peace. General Cooper, the alien synthesized voice carried complex harmonics that the translation software rendered into clear English. We have detected unusual activity in the resistance strongholds. They appear to be implementing some form of emergency protocol. Cooper frowned. Can you be more specific? The energy signatures match those of ancient terraforming systems, Nexus, Protocol 7 explained. But they have been modified in ways our analysis cannot predict. Send me the data, Volkov requested, already moving to her station. As she studied the readings, her expression grew increasingly concerned. They're trying to force evolve themselves, Anthony. Using all the combat data they gathered during the war, but compressed into an artificial evolutionary cycle. To what end? Cooper asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. They're trying to become what they originally wanted humanity to be, Volkov explained. Perfect warriors, combining their unified consciousness with our adaptability and creativity. But forcing that kind of evolution. She shook her head. The physical and psychological stress would be catastrophic. Cooper turned to Chen. How long until the combined fleet can reach their position? 6 hours at maximum quantum speed, she replied. But sir, if they're really attempting forced evolution on that scale, we might not have that long. He nodded grimly. Signal all ships. We move now. He turned to the Hadai representative. Nexus, Protocol 7, will need your insight into their systems. This is going to get worse before it gets better. The next few hours were a blur of activity as the combined fleet pushed their engines to the limit. Cooper used the time to study the tactical data, trying to understand what they might face. The resistance had been dangerous enough as standard Hadai. If they succeeded in their evolutionary experiment, they could become something far worse. When they arrived at the Antares cluster, the scene that greeted them was beyond anything they'd prepared for. The resistance strongholds were surrounded by swirling clouds of biomechanical matter, their structures twisting and reforming in impossible ways. By the Emperor, Chen whispered. What are we looking at? The future they wanted, Cooper replied grimly. And the price of forcing it. He keyed the fleet-wide comm, all units, implement containment protocol Omega. Do not allow any of those structures to break quarantine. The combined fleet moved into position, human ships and their Hadai allies forming an impenetrable barrier around the affected systems. Inside the quarantine zone, the transformation continued. The resistance forces were becoming something new, something that borrowed from both species but was loyal to neither. General, Volkov called out urgently, their neural patterns are completely destabilizing. The forced evolution is breaking down the barriers between individual consciousness and collective mind. They're losing themselves. As if to emphasize her point, a massive tendril of biomechanical matter erupted from one of the strongholds, its surface rippling with patterns that seemed to exist in more dimensions than human eyes could process. All ships, open fire. Cooper ordered. Contain that breach. The combined fleet responded with perfect coordination, human weapons and Hadai bioweapons striking in concert. The tendril recoiled, but not before Cooper caught glimpses of what it contained, faces and forms that were neither human nor Hadai, twisted by an evolution gone wrong. "Sir," Chen reported, "we're picking up a transmission from inside the quarantine zone." Sir, I think you need to hear this." The bridge speakers crackled with a chorus of voices speaking as one, but with undertones of terrible pain and confusion. "We see now, we understand, the perfect warrior cannot be forced into existence. Evolution must be earned, not taken. We are. The transmission dissolved into chaos as the speakers lost what remained of their individual identities. In the quarantine zone, the transformation was reaching its climax. The strongholds were collapsing in on themselves, their matter twisting into configurations that defied physics. Energy spike, multiple sensors reported simultaneously. Massive quantum fluctuations. All ships, maximum shields. Cooper ordered. Brace for. The universe seemed to hold its breath for a moment. Then, in a flash of light that temporarily overloaded every sensor in the fleet, the resistant strongholds imploded. When the sensors cleared, there was nothing left but cooling debris and quantum echoes. The bridge was silent for a long moment before Nexus, Protocol 7 spoke. They sought to become what we once thought we wanted. Instead, they became a warning of what happens when evolution is forced rather than earned. Cooper nodded slowly. A warning we all need to remember. He turned to address the bridge crew. Stand down from battle stations. Maintain quarantine of the affected space until we can be sure nothing survived. Later, in his quarters, Cooper sat with Volkov and Chen, discussing the implications of what they'd witnessed. The debris from the failed evolution attempt was still visible through his viewport, a stark reminder of the price of hubris. "We found their research data," Volkov reported. "They had convinced themselves they could achieve in hours what should take millennia. The strain on their neural network, their physical forms, they literally tore themselves apart trying to become something they weren't ready to be." "And we?" Chen asked quietly. "What have we become?" Cooper considered the question carefully. The war had changed humanity profoundly. They had mastered forms of warfare they'd never imagined possible, learned to interface with alien consciousness, developed technologies that blended the organic and mechanical in ways that rivaled the Hadai. But unlike the Resistance, they hadn't forced these changes. They had earned them through necessity, through adaptation, through countless small evolutions in response to real challenges. "We've become what we needed to be," he answered finally. "Not perfect warriors, but reluctant ones. We learned to fight not because we wanted to, but because we had to. And in learning to fight, we also learned when not to." The integration between human and Hadai society continued in the years that followed. The hybrid neural network evolved naturally, allowing for levels of cooperation and understanding that benefited both species. The combined fleet became a symbol not of warfare, but of the potential for different species to work together, to complement each other's strengths rather than try to forcibly acquire them. Cooper remained in service, eventually reaching the rank of general, but his role changed. Instead of leading armies into battle, he helped guide the integration process, ensuring that both species remembered the lessons they'd learned. The price of becoming masters of warfare had been high, but the wisdom gained from that mastery was invaluable. Standing once again in the Emperor's tomb years later, Cooper reflected on the long journey from that first day when the Hadai appeared. They had started as reluctant warriors, forced into combat by an enemy they didn't understand. They had ended as something else, not perfect warriors, but wise ones, who understood that true mastery of warfare meant knowing how to prevent it as much as how to wage it. The tomb stood silent as always, but Cooper imagined he could feel the Emperor's approval. Humanity had faced its trial by fire and emerged not just victorious, but transformed. They had become masters of warfare not through conquest or dominance, but through necessity, adaptation, and ultimately, understanding. And in that mastery, they had found something greater than victory, they had found wisdom.